somebody says something to you. Maybe it's a comment at work, a look from someone you love, a message that shouldn't mean anything. And yet hours later, you're still carrying it. It's sitting in your chest. You replay it. You rewrite what you should have said. You rewrite what you should have said. You wonder why it got under your skin when you thought you were past this. You're not weak. You're not broken. You're not too sensitive. But something in you keeps absorbing what isn't yours to carry. And no matter how many times you tell yourself to let it go, it stays. Like a splinter you can't reach. If that's where you are right now, stay here. Because over the next 60 minutes, we're going to walk through something that could genuinely shift how you move through the world. Not by building walls, not by numbing yourself, not by pretending things don't hurt, but by understanding deeply, honestly, why certain things still pierce you, and what Carl Jung, one of the most brilliant minds in the history of psychology, discovered about making the inner self so grounded, so integrated, that the noise of the outside world loses its power over you. This isn't about becoming cold, it's about becoming whole. And there is a vast difference between the two. Jung spent his life studying what lives beneath the surface of human behavior. The shadows, the wounds, the masks, the parts of ourselves we abandon to survive. And what he found was something remarkable. That emotional pain doesn't come from the outside, it comes from the unfinished work within. The cruel comment only lands because it hits a bruise that was already there. The rejection only devastates because it confirms a sentence you've been whispering to yourself since childhood. And the good news, the real transformative, life-altering good news, is that once you see the mechanism, it begins to lose its grip on you. So if you spent years wondering why you feel everything so deeply, why other people's words have the power to ruin your entire day, why you can't seem to build that inner steadiness you see in others, you're in the right place. Because what we're about to explore isn't self-help advice, it's self-understanding. And Jung believed with everything he had that understanding yourself is the single most radical act of freedom a human being can perform. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment. Tell me honestly, what is the one thing someone can say to you that still has the power to completely unravel your day? I want to know, because chances are by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why that particular thing holds so much power over you. And more importantly, you'll know what to do about it. Now let's begin. Think about the last time you were truly hurt by something someone said. Not physically, not in any visible way, but that deep internal sting, the kind that makes your stomach drop, your jaw tighten, your thoughts spiral. Maybe it was criticism from a boss. Maybe it was a passing remark from a friend. Maybe it was silence from someone you expected warmth from. Whatever it was, the pain was real. And here is what most people get wrong about that moment. They think the other person caused the pain. They think the words were the weapon. They think if only that person had said something different or said nothing at all, they would be fine. But Jung saw it completely differently. He said that when something from the outside wounds you disproportionately, it is because it has found a matching wound on the inside. The external event is just the key. The lock was already there, already waiting, already installed inside your psyche long before that conversation ever happened. This is one of the most liberating ideas in all of psychology, because it means the source of your pain is not out there. It's in here, and if it's in here, that means you have access to it. You can reach it. You can work with it. You can heal it. The outside world didn't break you. It simply showed you where you were already cracked. And that crack is not a flaw, it's an invitation. Jung called this the complex. Not in the casual way we throw that word around today. Not, oh, he has a complex about his height. Jung meant something far more precise and far more powerful. A complex in Jungian psychology is a cluster of emotions, memories, and associations that live in the unconscious mind, organized around the central theme. And here is the crucial part. The complex has its own energy, its own will, its own gravity. When something in the outer world touches it, the complex activates. And when it activates, it doesn't ask permission. It takes over. Have you ever reacted to something and immediately thought, that was not proportional? Why did I react like that? That is a complex firing. The response wasn't coming from you, the conscious, rational adult standing in the room. It was coming from a much younger version of you, a version that got hurt, that got shamed, that got ignored, that got told they weren't enough. And that younger version never processed what happened. The emotions got stored, buried, filed away in the unconscious, but they didn't disappear. They became a complex. And now, decades later, a coworker makes a comment and suddenly you're not a grown adult at work. You're a child standing in a kitchen, hearing your parents say the same thing in a different voice. This is not weakness. This is the architecture of the human psyche. Everyone has complexes. Jung himself said, complexes are the building blocks of the psyche. They aren't a sign that something is wrong with you. They are a sign that something happened to you, something that your mind at the time wasn't equipped to fully process. So it stored the experience in a capsule of emotion and buried it deep, and there it waits, not dead, alive, listening, ready to be triggered. So the first truth about becoming emotionally untouchable is this: you are not reacting to the present. You are reacting to the present. You are reacting to the past through the present. And until you understand which complexes are running your emotional life, you will continue to be at their mercy. The outside world will keep pressing the same buttons because the buttons are still installed. The work isn't to change the world. The work is to find the buttons and understand why they're there. Let me ask you something. Have you ever watched someone receive a harsh criticism and barely flinch? Not in a cold, detached way. Not in a way that suggests they don't care. But in a way that suggests they heard it, considered it, and chose not to be destroyed by it. And you thought, how? How do they do that? What do they have that I don't? The answer, according to Jung, is not thicker skin. It's not confidence. It's not even courage. It's integration. They have done the inner work of bringing unconscious material into consciousness. They've looked at their wounds. They've met their shadow. They've dissolved enough of their complexes that the trigger no longer finds a matching wound inside. The bullet still flies, but there's no target left to hit. This is what emotional untouchability actually means. Not that nothing reaches you, but that what reaches you passes through a psyche that is whole enough to process it without shattering. The difference between someone who is destroyed by criticism and someone who can hear it, learn from it, and move on is not about what was said. It's about the internal landscape of the person hearing it. And this is where the real work begins. Jung gave us a word for this journey: individuation. It's the process of becoming who you actually are, beneath all the layers of conditioning, expectation, and fear. Becoming a complete, integrated human being. Not perfect, not invulnerable, but whole. And wholeness, Jung believed, is the only real protection there is. But individuation doesn't start with some mystical revelation. It starts with something far more uncomfortable. It starts with the shadow. You've heard the word before, probably. But let me tell you what the shadow really is, because most people misunderstand it. The shadow is not your dark side. It's not the evil within you. It's not some monster hiding in a closet. The shadow is everything about yourself that you were taught to reject. It's the parts of your personality that didn't fit the expectations of your family, your culture, your environment. The anger you were told was unacceptable. The sadness you were told was weak. The ambition you were told was selfish. The sexuality you were told was shameful. The joy you were told was too loud. Every time someone said, "Don't be like that," a piece of you got pushed into the shadow, not destroyed, just hidden, exiled. Exiled to a place you can't easily see. And over time, the shadow grew, not because you're a bad person, but because you're a socialized one. You learned which parts of yourself were welcome and which parts needed to disappear, and you got very good at the performance. So good, in fact, that you forgot certain parts of you even existed. But the shadow doesn't forget. It can't. It lives in the unconscious. And it expresses itself in ways you don't always recognize. Through sudden anger, through irrational jealousy, through intense reactions to seemingly small events, through the things that bother you most about other people. That last one is important. Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. When someone's behavior triggers a disproportionate emotional response in you, there's a very good chance you're seeing your own shadow projected onto them. The arrogance you despise in your colleague might be the ambition you were never allowed to own. The neediness you judge in a friend might be the vulnerability you were punished for showing. The loudness of a stranger might mirror the expressiveness you were forced to silence. This is called projection, and it is one of the most powerful, most invisible forces shaping your emotional life. You think you're reacting to the world, but you're reacting to yourself, reflected back in 1,000 distorted mirrors. And every time you judge, every time you react, every time you feel that hot surge of emotion that seems to come from nowhere, the shadow is speaking. It's saying, look at me, I'm still here, I'm still waiting. When are you gonna let me come home? Now here's where things get really interesting. Because the shadow isn't just filled with things you think are negative. It also contains gold. Jung called it the golden shadow. And this might be the most underappreciated idea in all of his work. Think about the people you admire. The ones who seem to radiate something you feel you lack. Confidence, creativity, warmth, leadership, the ability to speak without apology, the ability to walk into a room and own it without pretending. You look at them and think, I could never be like that. But Jung would say, the reason you see it so clearly in them is because it already exists in you. You just put it in the shadow. The golden shadow holds your unlived potential, the talents you never developed because someone told you they were impractical, the confidence you never claimed because you were taught to be small, the voice you never used because you learned that silence was safer. All of that potential is still inside you, not gone, just hidden behind the same wall where you put your pain. And this is why shadow work is not just about healing wounds. It's about reclaiming power, real power. Not the kind that comes from dominating others or proving yourself. The kind that comes from finally being all of who you are. But how do you actually do this? How do you work with the shadow when, by definition, you can't see it? Jung left us a map, and it starts with paying attention to the things that disturb you most. The next time someone says something that rattles you, instead of focusing on them, turn the lens inward. Ask yourself, what just got activated in me? Why does this specific thing have so much power? When have I felt this exact feeling before? Don't rush to answer. Sit with it. Let the question work on you, because the conscious mind doesn't hold the answer. The answer is in the unconscious, and the unconscious speaks slowly. It speaks through dreams, through emotions, through images, through a body. Jung said the unconscious always tries to communicate with us. The problem is we've been trained to ignore it. We've been taught to be rational, logical, productive. We've been told that emotions are obstacles, that feelings are problems to be solved, that the body's signals are inconveniences. And in doing so, we've severed the connection to the deepest, wisest part of ourselves. The person who is emotionally untouchable is not someone who doesn't feel. They are someone who feels fully but is not controlled by feeling. They have a relationship with their inner world. They know their triggers. They know their wounds. They know which complexes are active and why. And because they know these things, the unconscious doesn't have to scream to get their attention. It can whisper, and they listen. This is the difference between reaction and response. Reaction is automatic. It comes from the complex, from the shadow, from the wounded child who never got to process what happened. Response is conscious. It comes from someone who has done enough inner work to create space between the stimulus and the behavior. In that space, there is choice, and in that choice, there is freedom. Viktor Frankl, who was influenced by many of the same ideas, said something similar. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our freedom. Jung would add that the only way to widen that space is to make the unconscious, to bring light to the parts of yourself you've been avoiding, to stop running from your shadow and turn around and face it. And I want to be honest with you here. This is not easy work. It is not comfortable. It is not something you do once and move on from. The shadow doesn't reveal itself all at once. It reveals itself in layers. You think you've dealt with your anger, and then a situation arises that shows you there's a deeper layer you haven't touched. You think you've healed your relationship with rejection, and then someone leaves and the old wound opens again. Different this time, but just as raw. This is normal. This is the process. Jung never promised that individuation would make you painless. He promised it would make you real. And being real means feeling everything, the full spectrum of human experience, without being enslaved by any of it. Let me talk about something else now, something that plays a massive role in why you absorb other people's emotions and judgments so easily. Jung called it the persona. You already know what a mask is. You wear one every day. You wear one at work. You wear one with your family. You wear one when you meet strangers. You even wear one with yourself sometimes. The persona is the version of you that the world gets to see. It's the curated self, the acceptable self, the self that knows what to say and when to smile and how to behave. And let me be clear, the persona is not evil. It's necessary. You need a social mask to function in the world. You can't walk around with your entire unconscious exposed. That would be chaos. The persona allows you to navigate society, to hold down a job, to maintain relationships. Jung said the persona is like a useful tool, but the problem, the deep, quiet, corrosive problem, is when you mistake the mask for the face. When you've been wearing the persona for so long that you've forgotten there's someone underneath. When the mask becomes so fused with your identity that taking it off feels like dying. When the thought of someone seeing the real you, the messy, imperfect, complicated, unpolished you, fills you with absolute terror. This is where emotional vulnerability comes from. Not from feeling too much, but from having built your entire identity on a mask and then living in constant fear that someone will knock it off. The reason someone else's words can destroy you is not that their words are powerful. It's that your sense of self is fragile, and it's fragile because it's built on an image, not on substance. Think about it. If your entire sense of worth comes from being the competent one, the successful one, the likable one, the strong one, then any comment that threatens that image threatens your entire existence, not your life, but something that feels even closer, your identity. And the psyche will protect identity with the same ferocity it protects the body. That's why a casual remark can trigger a fight-or-flight response. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference between a physical threat and an identity threat. It just knows something essential is under attack. Jung saw this everywhere. People living entirely through their persona, investing all their energy into maintaining the image, and then collapsing when the image was challenged. He said this was one of the great tragedies of modern life. Not that people suffer, but that they suffer for the wrong reasons. They suffer to protect something that isn't even real. The path out is to build a sense of self that doesn't depend on the mask, to develop an identity rooted not in how others see you, but in how deeply you know yourself. When your sense of worth comes from within, from the ongoing relationship with your own psyche, your own shadow, your own truth, then the persona becomes what it was always meant to be, a useful tool, not a prison, not a life support system, just a tool you pick up when you need it and put down when you don't. And when you reach that point, something extraordinary happens. People can say whatever they want about you. They can criticize you. They can reject you. They can misunderstand you. And it still reaches you. You're still human. You still feel it. But it doesn't shatter you, because the thing they're attacking is the mask. And you know you're not the mask. That is emotional untouchability, not armor, not walls, not numbness. Just a self so grounded in its own truth that the storms of the world become weather you can walk through instead of hurricanes that flatten you. But let me go deeper, because there's a layer beneath the shadow and the persona that most people never explore. And this is where Jung's work becomes truly profound. Jung believed that within every person there exists an inner figure of the opposite gender. In a man, he called it the anima. In a woman, he called it the animus. And before you dismiss this as outdated, let me explain what he actually meant, because the insight behind it is extraordinarily relevant to emotional resilience. The anima and animus represent the parts of your psyche that you associate with the opposite of how you were socialized. If you were raised to be tough, logical, controlled, then the anima or animus holds the softness, the intuition, the emotionality that you pushed away. If you were raised to be nurturing, yielding, accommodating, then it holds the assertiveness, the independence, the fire that you suppressed. And here's the thing, these inner figures don't just sit there quietly. They shape your emotional life in ways you can't imagine. When the anima or animus is unconscious, unintegrated, unacknowledged, it creates emotional chaos. You find yourself in relationships that repeat the same painful pattern. You'll get triggered by people who embody the very qualities you've denied in yourself. You swing between emotional extremes because a whole dimension of your psyche is operating without your awareness. Jung saw the anima and animus as bridges to the deeper self. When you integrate them, when you consciously acknowledge and develop the qualities they represent, something remarkable happens. You become more balanced, more whole, more emotionally stable, not because you've suppressed anything, but because you've expanded. You've given yourself permission to be the full range of what a human being can be. A person who has integrated the anima or animus doesn't collapse when emotions arise. They don't panic when they feel vulnerable. They don't need to prove their toughness or deny their softness. They can hold both. They can move fluidly between strength and tenderness, between logic and intuition, between action and stillness. And that flexibility, that inner range, is what makes them emotionally resilient in a way that rigid people never can be. Rigidity is not strength. Rigidity is brittleness. It's the tree that refuses to bend and then snaps in the storm. The emotionally untouchable person is not rigid. They are fluid. They can absorb the impact because they have enough inner space to hold it. And that space comes from having integrated all the parts of themselves, not just the ones that were socially approved. So if you've been told your whole life to be tough, to man up, to stop being so emotional, and you've obeyed, you've built that wall, you've hardened yourself, I need to tell you something. That hardness is not protecting you. It's making you more vulnerable, because every emotion you suppress doesn't go away. It goes underground. And from underground, it controls you in ways you can't see. The man who never cries eventually explodes in rage. The woman who never asserts herself eventually drowns in resentment. The suppressed doesn't disappear, it transforms. And the transformed version is always worse than the original. Jung understood this. He said, what you resist persists, not as a motivational quote, as a clinical observation. The psyche is a system that seeks balance. When you push something down on one side, it rises on another. When you deny an emotion, it finds a back door through your body, through your relationships, through your reactions to things that shouldn't bother you, but somehow do. The solution is not to push harder. The solution is to stop pushing altogether, to turn toward the emotion instead of away from it, to ask it what it wants, to let it speak. Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, and he was right. It is terrifying, because accepting yourself completely means accepting the parts of you that you've been at war with for decades. The anger, the neediness, the fear, the grief, the desire, the parts that feel ugly, that feel shameful, that feel too much. But on the other side of that acceptance is something that no external event can take from you. Peace. Not the peace of numbness, not the peace of avoidance, the peace of someone who has looked at every corner of their own soul and said, yes, this too, this is also me, and I can hold it. Let me tell you about something Jung experienced in his own life that illustrates everything we've been talking about. After his break with Sigmund Freud, Jung went through a period of intense inner turmoil. He was alone. His professional reputation was under attack. His ideas were being dismissed. And instead of armoring up, instead of fighting back, instead of building walls, he did something extraordinary. He turned inward. He began what he later called his confrontation with the unconscious. He sat with his own darkness. He let images rise from the depths of his psyche. He recorded them. He painted them. He dialogued with figures that appeared in his imagination. He let himself be taken apart. This period nearly destroyed him. He said so himself. There were moments when he was not sure he would come out the other side with his sanity intact. But he did. And what emerged from that period was not just his greatest work. It was a version of himself that was fundamentally different from the person who had entered the darkness. He became, in his own words, more fully himself, not invulnerable, not untouchable in the sense of being cut off from feeling, but rooted, grounded in a self-knowledge so deep that the opinions of the outside world simply couldn't reach the foundation. That is what this work offers. Not a shield, not a technique, not a trick you can learn in an afternoon, but a fundamental transformation in how you relate to yourself. And when that relationship changes, everything changes. The way you hear criticism changes. The way you experience rejection changes. The way you stand in a room full of people who might judge you changes. Not because they've changed, because you have. Now I want to talk about something that might be the most practical insight in this entire video. And it has to do with how you relate to your own emotions in real time. Most people, when a strong emotion arises, do one of two things. They either identify with it completely. I am angry, I am hurt, I am devastated, and the emotion swallows them whole. Or they try to suppress it, push it down, rationalize it away, distract themselves from it. Both of these responses leave you at the mercy of the emotion. The first because you've been consumed by it, the second because you buried something alive and it will come back stronger. Jung offered a third way. He called it active imagination, but you don't need the technical term. The principle is simple. When a strong emotion arises, you don't become it and you don't reject it. You witness it. You turn toward it with curiosity instead of fear. You treat the emotion not as a problem to be solved, but as a visitor who has come with a message. Imagine this. Someone criticizes you harshly. The old reaction would be to spiral, to defend, to crumble, but instead you pause. You notice the feeling in your body, tightness in the chest, heat in the face, a sinking in the stomach. And instead of asking, how do I make this stop, you ask, what is this? Where have I felt this before? What does this remind me of? And you wait. You let the psyche answer in its own time. Maybe an image comes. Maybe a memory surfaces. Maybe you realize the feeling isn't about this moment at all. It's about being 12 years old and being laughed at in front of the class. It's about being told you weren't good enough. It's about a moment so old you'd forgotten it existed. But your body didn't forget. Your unconscious didn't forget. And now for the first time, you're seeing it clearly. Not through the fog of reaction, not through the panic of the triggered complex, but clearly, like looking at a photograph you've never seen before, even though you were there when it was taken. This is the moment of integration. This is where healing happens. Not in the grand gestures, not in the dramatic breakthroughs, but in the quiet, honest act of witnessing your own pain without running from it. When you do this, something almost magical occurs. The emotion loosens its grip, not because you fought it, but because you understood it. And understanding, true understanding, is the most powerful solvent the psyche has. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is what he meant. Every unprocessed emotion, every buried memory, every exiled part of your personality is running your life from behind the scenes. You think you're making free choices, but you're actually following a script written by your wounds. You think you're reacting to the present, but you're actually replaying the past. And the only way to break the cycle is to bring light to what's been living in darkness. This is the work, day by day, emotion by emotion, trigger by trigger, not trying to become invincible, trying to become aware. Because awareness is the real superpower here. Not strength, not control, awareness. The emotionally untouchable person isn't someone who doesn't get triggered. They're someone who gets triggered and knows what's happening. They feel the surge of emotion, and instead of being swept away, they think, there it is. I know this one. This is the complex around rejection. This is the wound from childhood. This is the shadow trying to get my attention. And in that moment of recognition, the emotion transforms from a tyrant into a teacher. Let me give you a practical example of how this plays out in everyday life. Imagine you're at a dinner with friends. Someone makes a joke at your expense. Everyone laughs. You laugh too on the surface. But inside, something has shifted. You feel small, foolish, exposed. The rest of the evening, you're performing, smiling when you don't mean it, participating in conversations you've mentally left. And when you get home, the feeling intensifies. You lie in bed replaying the moment. You feel a strange mix of anger and shame that seems wildly out of proportion to what actually happened. It was just a joke. Why does it feel like something essential was taken from you? Now the old version of you would do one of several things. Stew in the feeling for days. Tell yourself you're overreacting. Get angry at the friend. Distance yourself from the group. Build a mental case for why those people aren't really your friends. All of these are the unconscious trying to protect you using the only tools it has. None of them actually work, but the integrated version of you does something different. You notice the feelings. You name it. I feel small. I feel exposed. I feel ashamed. You don't judge it. You don't try to fix it. You ask, when did I first feel this way? And maybe you remember. Maybe you were 7 years old and your older sibling mocked you in front of relatives, and everyone laughed and your parents said, "Oh, don't be so sensitive." And in that moment, a complex was born. The message was clear. You are something to be laughed at. Your feelings don't matter. If you show that it hurts, you'll be dismissed again. That complex has been running for 20, 30, maybe 40 years, and it activated at dinner because the pattern matched. Someone made fun of you. People laughed. And the 7-year-old inside you felt the same thing they felt back then. Unsafe, unimportant, alone. But now you see it. Now you understand the mechanism. And in that understanding, something shifts. The emotion doesn't vanish. It's still there, but it's been seen, it's been heard, it's been held by a conscious mind that says, I understand where this comes from. I'm not 7 years old anymore. I can take care of this feeling now, and that is a profoundly different experience from being consumed by an emotion you can't explain. Over time, with practice, this kind of inner work changes the entire texture of your emotional life. The triggers don't disappear, but they lose their intensity. The complexes don't dissolve overnight, but they loosen. The things that used to shatter you start to just graze you. Not because you become numb, but because you become conscious. And that is what Jung meant by making the unconscious. And that is what Jung meant by making the unconscious. It's not an intellectual exercise. It's a way of being, a way of relating to yourself that transforms everything. Now I want to talk about something that most people find deeply uncomfortable, and that's the relationship between emotional pain and meaning. We live in a culture that treats pain as a problem, something to be eliminated, something to be medicated, something to be overcome as quickly as possible, so you can get back to being productive. And I understand the impulse. Pain is unpleasant. No one seeks it out. No one enjoys sitting in it. But Jung had a radically different view. He believed that suffering, when approached consciously, is one of the most powerful catalysts for psychological growth. Not because pain is good, but because pain often carries information that nothing else can deliver. The wound shows you where you're still unconscious. The heartbreak shows you which parts of yourself you'd outsource to another person. The failure shows you which parts of your identity were built on approval rather than truth. Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. And he didn't say that lightly. He said it as someone who had walked through his own psychological underworld and come out the other side fundamentally changed. The emotionally untouchable person doesn't avoid pain. They've developed a different relationship with it. They see pain not as evidence that something is going wrong, but as a signal that something is trying to become conscious. They don't wallow in it. They don't dramatize it. They don't build an identity around being wounded. But they don't run from it either. They face it. They ask it questions. They let it teach them. And this is perhaps the most counterintuitive truth of all. The people who seem most unbothered by the world's chaos are not the ones who feel the least. They're the ones who have felt the most and metabolized it. They've turned pain into understanding. They've turned wounds into wisdom. They've done the alchemical work that Jung believed was the very purpose of human life, turning lead into gold. Not literally, psychologically, taking the heaviest, darkest, most difficult experiences of your life and extracting from them the insight and self-knowledge that makes you who you are. This is the process of individuation at its core. Not becoming perfect, becoming complete, letting every experience, even the painful ones, contribute to the wholeness of your being. Jung saw this as a sacred process, not religious necessarily, but sacred in the sense that it is the deepest, most important work a human being can do. And when you're engaged in this process, something happens to the way the world affects you. The things that used to feel like attacks start to feel like invitations. The criticism that used to crush you becomes information you can use. The rejection that used to define you becomes a doorway to deeper self-knowledge, not because you've rationalized the pain away, but because you've changed your relationship with pain itself. There's a concept in Jungian psychology that I think ties all of this together, and it's the concept of the self. Capital S. Not the self you think of when you think of myself, not the ego, not the persona, not any of the partial identities you've constructed over the years. The self, in Jung's framework, is the totality of the psyche. It includes everything, the conscious and the unconscious, the shadow and the light, the masculine and the feminine, the known and the unknown. It is the center of the whole personality, and it is the destination of individuation. Most people live their entire lives identified with the ego. The ego is the part of you that says, I. It's your conscious identity, your name, your job title, your roles, your story. And the ego is important. You need it. You can't function without it. But the ego is not the whole picture. It's not even most of the picture. Jung said the ego is like a cork floating on the surface of the ocean. The ocean is the self. The ego thinks it's everything because it's all it can see. But beneath it is a vast, unfathomable depth of psychic life that shapes everything the ego experiences. When you're identified solely with the ego, you're fragile. Because the ego is small. It's a construct. It can be challenged, threatened, dismantled. Every insult, every failure, every unexpected loss threatens the ego because the ego's existence depends on maintaining its story. And stories can be rewritten by anyone. But when you begin to develop a relationship with the self, something shifts at the deepest level. Your center of gravity moves. You're no longer identified with the small, vulnerable ego alone. You're connected to something larger, something more stable, something that cannot be destroyed by external events, because it includes everything, the good and the bad, the successes and the failures, the pride and the shame. When Jung talked about the self, he sometimes used the image of a mandala, a circular design that represents wholeness. He found that his patients, and he himself, would spontaneously draw or dream of mandalas during periods of intense inner work. And he came to believe that the mandala was the psyche's way of representing its own wholeness to itself. A reminder that beneath the chaos of daily life, beneath the noise and the pain and the confusion, there is an organizing center that holds everything together. Connecting with the self doesn't mean you transcend your problems. It doesn't mean you float above your emotions in some state of permanent calm. It means you have an anchor, a reference point that isn't dependent on what happens to you. When someone insults you, the ego gets hurt. That's natural. But if you have a relationship with the self, the hurt doesn't consume you, because there's a deeper part of you that says, this is painful, but this is not all of who I am. This is one experience within a much larger whole. That is the source of real emotional resilience, not toughness, not avoidance, not positive thinking, but a genuine lived connection to the fullness of your own being. And this brings me to something I want to be very direct about, because there is a version of emotional untouchability that is deeply unhealthy. And I need to name it so you don't confuse it with what we're talking about here. Some people become untouchable by shutting down, by disconnecting from their emotions entirely, by building walls so thick that nothing gets in. And on the surface, they might look strong. They might look like they have it all together. They might look like nothing bothers them, but underneath, they're empty, or numb, or quietly falling apart. They haven't integrated their shadow. They've buried it deeper. They've buried it deeper. They haven't developed a relationship with the self. They've abandoned the self entirely and replaced it with a performance of invulnerability. Jung would have called this a dangerous inflation of the persona, a state where the mask has completely taken over and the person underneath is starving. And this is not strength. This is psychological death while still breathing. Real emotional resilience looks different from the outside. The truly integrated person still cries, still gets angry, still feels hurt, still has bad days. They're not performing calm. They're not performing control. They are simply grounded in a self-knowledge that allows them to feel fully without losing themselves in the feeling. There's a warmth to them, an openness, because they're not afraid of their own emotions. They're not afraid of yours either. They can sit with someone else's pain without needing to fix it or flee from it. They can hear harsh truths without crumbling. They can be wrong without having an existential crisis. They can be alone without having an existential crisis. They can be alone without having it lonely. They can be in a crowd without feeling invaded. This is what wholeness looks like in practice, not perfection, not stoicism, not spiritual bypassing. Just a human being who has done the difficult, unglamorous, ongoing work of knowing themselves deeply. And from that knowing, a natural resilience has emerged, not as something they built, but as something that revealed itself when they stopped running from who they are. Now let me talk about dreams, because this is one of the most powerful and most overlooked tools in the entire Jungian toolkit, and it has everything to do with becoming emotionally untouchable. Jung believed that dreams are messages from the unconscious, not random neural noise, not meaningless replays of daily events, but intentional communications from the deepest part of the psyche, designed to help you see what the conscious mind cannot or will not see. When you're struggling emotionally, when something has triggered you and you can't figure out why, when you feel stuck in a pattern you can't break, the unconscious often sends dreams that contain the missing piece, not in plain language. The unconscious doesn't work that way. It speaks in symbols, in images, in narratives that feel strange and irrational on the surface, but carry profound meaning underneath. Jung spent decades studying his own dreams and the dreams of his patients, and he found that the unconscious is remarkably wise. It knows things the ego doesn't know. It sees patterns the conscious mind misses. And it's always trying to move you toward wholeness. Even when the dreams are frightening, even when they're disturbing, even when they make no sense, the unconscious is not your enemy. It's the deepest ally you have. If you want to work with your dreams, and I strongly suggest you do, there are a few things to keep in mind. First, write them down immediately. The conscious mind forgets dreams quickly because dream content comes from the unconscious and doesn't fit the ego's frame of reference. keep a notebook by your bed. Write everything you remember, even fragments. Second, don't interpret too quickly. The ego wants to assign meaning immediately, to box the dream into a neat explanation. Resist that. Let the images sit with you. Live with them. Let them unfold their meaning over time. Jung said the dream tells you exactly what it means, if you're patient enough to listen. Third, pay attention to the emotions in the dream. The feelings are often more important than the events. If you dream about a house and feel dread, the house isn't the message, the dread is. Ask yourself, where in my waking life do I feel this same dread? What am I avoiding? Fourth, notice recurring dreams or recurring themes. These are the unconscious insisting on something. It's repeating itself because you haven't heard the message yet. The repetition isn't dysfunction, it's persistence. The unconscious is saying, this matters, please pay attention. When you develop a practice of working with your dreams, you create an ongoing dialogue with the unconscious. And that dialogue is the single most important relationship in your inner life. Because the unconscious is where the shadow lives. It's where the complexes live. It's where the self lives. And when you're in communication with it, you're no longer fighting blind. You have a partner in the work, a guide that knows the terrain better than you ever could from the surface. There's a particular kind of dream that Jung paid special attention to. He called them big dreams. These are dreams that feel different from ordinary dreams. They have a numinous quality, a sense of significance that goes beyond the personal. They often involve archetypal images, figures, and landscapes that feel ancient, universal, mythic. And they can arrive at pivotal moments in a person's life, often during times of deep crisis or transformation. If you ever had a dream that stayed with you for days, weeks, even years, a dream that felt more real than waking life, a dream that seemed to carry a message, not just from your personal unconscious, but from something larger, then you may have experienced what Jung would call a big dream. And these dreams are not to be dismissed. They are, in Jung's view, direct communications from the self. They are the psyche showing you the path forward when the ego can't find it. Now, I know some of this might sound abstract. Dreams, archetypes, the self. These aren't things you can hold in your hand. They aren't strategies you can implement on a Monday morning. And I understand if part of you is thinking, this is interesting, but how does it actually help me stop being hurt by people? So let me bring it back to earth. Let me give you the practical thread that runs through everything we've discussed. The mechanism of emotional suffering is this. Something happens in the external world. It activates an unconscious wound, a complex, a shadow element, an unintegrated part of the psyche. The emotion that arises is not really about the present moment. It's about unfinished business from the past, operating through the present. And because you don't see the mechanism, you attribute all the pain to the external event. You think they did this to you. But in truth, the situation simply revealed what was already there. The mechanism of emotional freedom is this. Something happens in the external world. It activates the same wound, the same complex, the same shadow. But this time, you recognize it. You see the pattern. You feel the emotion, but you don't become it. You trace it back to its source. You hold it with compassion instead of fear. And in doing so, you take back the power you'd been giving to the outside world for years. This doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen perfectly. It doesn't happen once and then you're done. It happens gradually, through 1,000 small moments of awareness, of choosing to look inward when every instinct screams at you to blame outward. It is a practice, a daily, ongoing, sometimes exhausting practice of self-honesty. But each time you do it, something changes. The complex loosens a little. The shadow becomes a little less frightening. The space between trigger and response widens slightly. And over time, those small shifts accumulate into something that looks from the outside like a person who simply doesn't get rattled anymore. But from the inside, you know the truth. You still feel everything. You just learned how to hold it. Let me offer you something now. 6 truths, drawn from everything we've explored. 6 Jungian principles that, if you genuinely take them to heart, will fundamentally change how the world affects you. The first truth: your emotional reactions are always telling you something about yourself, not about the person who triggered them. The trigger is the messenger. The message is about your inner world. Every time you feel disproportionately hurt, angry, or destabilized, your unconscious is pointing you towards something that needs attention. Start treating emotional pain as information rather than injustice, and your entire relationship with suffering will shift. The second truth: the parts of yourself you have rejected are the source of your greatest vulnerability. The shadow contains everything you've been taught to hide, and those hidden parts are exactly what the world presses on when it hurts you. The qualities you judge most harshly in others are the qualities you've exiled in yourself. Reclaim them, integrate them, and watch how much harder it becomes for anyone to use them against you. The third truth: your sense of self must be rooted in something deeper than your image. If your identity is built on the persona, on how others see you, on your accomplishments, your likability, your roles, then every threat to that image will feel like annihilation. Build your identity on self-knowledge instead. Know your shadow, know your wounds, know your strengths and your fears. The person who knows themselves deeply cannot be easily shaken, because their foundation is not dependent on external validation. The fourth truth: feeling everything is not the same as being controlled by everything. The goal is not to stop feeling. The goal is not to stop feeling. The goal is to develop the capacity to feel fully while maintaining inner balance. This capacity grows through practice, through the ongoing work of making the unconscious conscious, through learning to witness your emotions instead of being swept away by them. The fifth truth: solitude is not escape. It is the laboratory of self-knowledge. The noise of the world drowns out the voice of the unconscious. You need quiet to hear yourself. You need space to do the inner work. The time you spend alone, honestly engaging with your inner life, is not wasted time. It is the most productive time you will ever spend. The sixth truth: becoming emotionally untouchable is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning. When you're no longer at the mercy of every external event, when you've done enough shadow work and inner integration to stand firmly in your own being, you become available for something much greater: real connection, real intimacy, real presence. Because you're no longer approaching others from a place of fear and neediness. You're approaching them from a place of wholeness, and from wholeness, everything is possible. Let me close with this. If you've made it to this point, something in you recognized itself in these words. You didn't stay for 60 minutes because the topic was interesting. You stayed because something here felt true. Something here matched a feeling you've been carrying for a long time, maybe without words, maybe without understanding, but carrying nonetheless. And I want you to know this: the fact that you feel things deeply is not your weakness. It never was. It is the raw material of your greatest strength, but only if you're willing to do the work. Only if you're willing to turn inward, to face what you've been avoiding, to sit with the discomfort instead of running from it, to get to know the parts of yourself you spent a lifetime hiding. Jung didn't promise an easy path. He promised a real one, He said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and that becoming requires everything we've talked about here. Confronting the shadow, dissolving the complexes, loosening the grip of the persona, integrating the anima or animus, developing a relationship with the self, learning to read the messages of the unconscious, and through all of it, finding the courage to feel deeply without being destroyed. You are not too sensitive. You are awake. You just haven't been given the tools to work with what you feel. Now you have them, not all of them. No single video can give you everything, but enough to start. Enough to take the first step on a journey that Jung believed was the most important journey any human being can take. The journey inward. The world will keep being the world. People will keep saying careless things. Situations will keep arising that press on your wounds. That won't change, but you can change. Not into someone who doesn't care, but into someone who cares from a place of strength rather than a place of fragility. Someone who feels the full weight of being human and carries it with grace. Not because they're superhuman, but because they've done the work of becoming fully, deeply, unapologetically human. That is what it means to be emotionally untouchable. And the journey starts now.